Thank you and welcome to our special council meeting held at our township office. It is Wednesday, December 20th, 2023. It is 3 p.m. I'd like to call to order the meeting. Resolution.
Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Greater Madawaska calls to order the December 20th, 2023 special council meeting at 3 p.m.
Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Levesque. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Section 2, approval of agenda. 2.1, approval of agenda, additions, deletions, excused. Resolution 310-23. Please read the resolution.
That the agenda of the special council meeting of December 20th, 2023 be approved as presented.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, we need a mover first. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Tripp, all in favor? Thank you, carried. Do we have any declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? There is none seen. Section 4.1, 2024 draft budget. And speaking to that today, we have Jennifer Eve, our treasurer.
Good afternoon, everyone. So on November 30th, the 2024 draft budget was presented to council for consideration. The draft budget included a 6.79% municipal tax rate to tax increase to fund operations and reserve contributions as per the asset management plan. At this meeting, council was asked to forward any questions regarding the budget's details to staff. Today we're meeting to have a recap of the budget process, and we're going to start again just by recapping the budget process. So when preparing the budget, staff again consider many factors: past year's spending, significant analysis of line by line, new projects, review of priorities, needs versus wants, maintaining the level of service to residents, and township plans. So again, our 2024 municipal pressures were decreased funding from the government, increased costs, inflation, asset management gap, infrastructure deficits, CVA, employee retention, increased level of service to residents, increased insurance costs. So we budgeted for a 10% increase for insurance costs. However, we just received our renewal this morning, and it came in at 16%. We are reviewing the impact of that. However, we don't believe that should be too detrimental. So our municipal tax revenue impacts. So the impact of a 1% tax increase on the township is $39,278. I just want everybody to remember that when we're talking about our increase in tax rate. So for every 100,000 of assessed value on residential property, a 1% municipal tax rate translates to $4.50 more in taxes for a year. So the 2024 draft budget has been updated to reflect additional information received, and that the township requires an additional levy revenue of $377,556 compared to the $351,111 presented on November 30th. The tax increase is summarized by a 1.6% AMP funding, 0.27 federal funding gap for capital projects, a 0.19% library contribution increase, a 0.51% OMPF funding gap, a 0.25% increase for Southside Way gravel, 2.51% increase for debt payment, and operational increases of 2.13%. This is where the total municipal tax rate increase of 7.46 presented in this presentation. So a summary of the changes. So the difference between the 6.79 originally presented to the 7.46 tax increase presented today is summarized below. So federal funding, 0.26%. We received the 2024 allocations for gas tax and OSIF, and the resulting net impact is $10,416 less than 2020, less than what we had budgeted for. So to ensure that we do not deplete our reserves any further, this tax increase has been added to the original draft budget proposed. Other changes that have been included are additional gravel for Southside Way of $10,000 equaling 0.24%, a request from the library for increased funding of $7,652 for a tax increase of 0.19%, and as well as a debt interest savings of 0.02% from interest rate savings of a projected 4.89% interest rate to an actual 4.71 that we just finalized. So the impact of this increase on taxpayers annually now is $33.59 per $100,000 of property assessment. A residential assessment of $200,000 equates to an annual increase on residents of $67.18. So on our overall budget, our highlights for our 2024 operating budget. So as per our strategic plan, a step towards balancing of core services and building our community includes the position to focus on economic development, tourism, and recreation. We've also added cost recovery items such as fire and recreation programming. A 3% cost of living increase has been added, and extraordinary items regarding the finance system, master fire plan, and risk assessment, and the Black Donald pit extension. So as a big picture of a whole, the 2024 draft budget for the operating and capital, there's $6.41 million operating budget for the township, a $1.6 million capital budget for a total of $8.0 million total budget. Our 2024 operating budget summary updated and now has an overall increase of $264,703 of revenue, and for a total budget of $6,460,026. $26. Sorry. Moving on to our operational expenses. All the item lines have been updated appropriately. You'll see the Public Works has increased the $10,000 for the Southside Way. Other than that, our debt payments have been reduced slightly from the original proposed budget, and our contribution to reserves has increased slightly for that $10,416. But those are the changes that you'll notice from the original budget to this amended one. So to summarize our 2024 draft capital budget, we have $1.3 million capital projects for roads, $146,000 in equipment, $95,000 in environment, at $10,000 in facilities, and $20,000 in fire for capital projects. And our reserve have been, they have not been impacted, because what we have done is we've increased our contribution for the $10,416 so that we do not deplete our reserves any further because of the lack of funding from the OSIF and gas tax. And our next steps. So our next steps today are to discuss the budget further, address if we need any additional council meetings, and then we decide whether we will adopt the budget on January 18th, regular council meeting.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions, comments, concerns, or opportunity to discuss this? Councillor Thompson?
I'm wondering if the environmental, if chipping the brush is included as an item, the way we did this year. Got a lot of comments saying it was a positive thing.
Leonard?
So the chipping of the brush was done this year due to the fact that I had money left over from the grinding of the construction waste. So for next year, it's not on the budget for 2024. But the plan is to keep the brush, hold it over till January of 2025 and do it in 2025's budget.
But still chip it, not
Yeah.
burn it. Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from council? Councillor Levesque?
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a great report. Thank you. Just a couple of questions beyond what I've already asked. A clarification about the Southside Way. Was that mentioned simply because it wasn't in the current year budget and you applied it?
Put your mic on, please, Steve. Thank you.
Sorry, in the report that was brought to council with Southside Way, I mentioned that we would add the necessary money to the gravel roads.
Right, and that was the only one this year that was in that category?
Extra,
okay,
yeah.
thank you. And I guess beyond where we are today. So it was a great report, really comprehensive. And the question is, I guess, what alternatives do we have any alternatives? And what would they be, and what would those risks be?
Alternatives to reduce the tax rate?
Correct, yeah.
Well, the staff have gone through very conservatively. We have gone item by item to ensure that we're saving as much as we can. In order to reduce the tax rate, we'd have to reduce service. And that would be a decision that council will have to decide.
So service reduction is really the only alternative?
That's right, yes.
Not debt recovery or extending anything or deferring anything to the following year, anything at all that would fit into that category? We
have deferred some capital projects, as mentioned in the original budget presentation. You don't want to get too far ahead of the game when you start pushing projects out. We want to ensure that we're still capable of doing them and following our EMP program. Oh, sorry, Renee. Oh, okay. I don't believe there is any future cuts other than reducing. We've done the best that we can to find every alternate saving and efficiency that we could provide to council and the public. But it really comes down to what does council want to provide as a service to the public, of a level of service.
Can I add to that? As the treasurer mentioned, those are the options. We have the contribution for asset management plan. You could reduce this, but it all comes down to service level. You reduce that means there's less money, there's less projects that can proceed. So ultimately it comes down to that. This year in September, we did a user fees and charges review. And these adjustments are more significant in planning and development. If this wasn't adjusted, we'd be reducing revenues right now, and the request for funds would be much more significant. I mean, the revenues are in the range of 30,000 to 40,000 lower than budgeted. Without that increase going into 2024, we would be reducing that also. So the extension has been made to increase revenues as well as work with the expenses or the budget we have to date.
Thank you. Supplemental?
To add to that, and I know we've talked about it, it's just maybe for the public's consumption. We've talked about cost recovery, and I know we are recovering some cost. What I'm looking for certainly is a plan for that, like when we would actually institute some cost recovery options, such as boat launch charges, other things that we're not charging for that we could potentially look at. And do we have any plan this coming year to increase or change any of that? I'm looking at Leonard, but I mean, it's whoever.
Leonard?
Yeah, we'd spoken previous council about coming to in January with a review of the honk parking, because that'll be a full year. So we'll bring that in January or February, and then we can discuss further of fees for Barnum Park and our boat launches at that time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any supplemental? Nope. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, and great presentation, and well done in terms of pulling the material together. I noticed that there's a trend downward in our grants that we're receiving. 2 years ago, they dropped by 20,000, and again, just in this cycle, they dropped. So every time that drops, our revenue is either tax-based or through grants. And I know historically, just from doing the research in preparation for this, there were very substantial grant applications pre-COVID, and then the grant system kind of fell apart. And I know that the variety of grants that are open is much more limited than it was pre-COVID. But I'm looking at the infrastructure funding, and that's the one I think that we got pulled back the 20,000 on. So we need to find a way to make that up, which is either reduction in services or fine-tuning the budget. But that 20,000 that came out of this year's grant has a direct impact on us, and it was 20,000 a year. So if that trend continues, I think looking forward, we need to start today for next year's budget, thinking about alternative revenue sources. And on that funding, it's two parts. So there's the part one, which is really formula driven, which is the 100,000 that we were allocated for. The second part was really an open call that they haven't done recently. And if they're not doing the open call, we can't have access to the funds. But these were the fundings that were used in the past to do the road projects in the multi-million-dollar range. I'm wondering, given what we've been through, we talked about this in a couple of other council meetings during the year, that we're in a unique position. We've gone through unprecedented growth that's impacted our asset management, it's impacted infrastructure, staff ability to deliver services. If it would be appropriate, once this is tabled and through, if we make a presentation to the province for consideration through the mayor to the local MPP to say, let's have a discussion about extraordinary funding to bridge some of these gaps in the AMP. And although that part two funding is not open, there may be an appetite to hear our plea. Anyway, just throwing that out there as another, a long-term strategic issue, because I think this trend that we're going through is going to get worse each year. We're tight this year. It's a good budget. You've really pared back and you've moved, and you can see in the micro how you've moved things around to better align the use of our limited resources. But I think going forward, we're going to need to get creative on our grants. And we've got some history there where we can go back to in terms of looking at what's available. And I'll stop there. I've got other things, but as we get through that.
Thank you. Yes, and sorry, just going to supplemental to that. Yes, the grants have drastically gone down, the availability of them. You're quite correct, sir. Councillor Popke? Oh, sorry.
And I think that trend without a voice will continue. And I think we're well poised to make a really strong policy position to get some discretionary one-time support, given the uniqueness of the landscape that we're in. In terms of the county, we've gone through the most exponential growth. And I think that message could be a trigger. And even on the cusp of Roma, I'm not sure a delegation at Roma would be appropriate, because we want a stronger approach. And I think a message through the local MPP as a bilateral just on this, where they're not going through the rapid chair switch of all the presentations at Roma, but just food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Popke?
I'm just wondering, when you have a budget surplus or whatever, like say policing, for example, not to be nitpicking, but last year we spent way less than the actual budget, and this year the budget is roughly the same as last year. So if we don't spend the full amount, does that get circulated to other areas of need, that what we allotted for that particular field?
Yes, so any surpluses we can distribute throughout a reserve at the end of the year. We'll come forward with a report to council on what the surpluses are, and discuss how we will distribute them among our reserve funds.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from Councillor Levesque?
Just a couple more, Jennifer, thank you. So with the 7.46, sorry, it was not 7.46, I'm looking at the wrong one. Is that what it was?
7.46,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
It was 6.79, I think.
Correct,
Yeah.
okay. So that's an optics issue, right? So we know that. We know the direct impact on everybody is not going to be as great as what it sounds like, but there will be some people concerned, I'm sure of it. Do you see with the impact coming online at some point? I don't know if it's when, I mean, I received a statement, but not sure how current it is and how many people have those things. But I know for my property, it works out to be $3.64 a week. So just to kind of put that in perspective, as you have with the $100,000, but actually putting it against an actual property and the actual impact, it's $3.64. So it's really not as bad as people may think it is, but it's still over 7%, well over 7%, which is pretty significant for this area. And again, just for the audience, I know there's been a lot of discussion around our tax rate versus other municipalities in the area, and we're considerably less still. So the question is longer term, medium to long term, like how do we recover from that? Do we continue to, like, do we anticipate another large increase next year and the year after to kind of get to where we should be to maintain the services that we should have?
Thank you. CEO?
The budget is completely, it correlates completely with services. So at this point, there's an increase this year because we added services. We are adding a position or 2 positions in the community and the full-time fire chief. Short answer is as long as council and the community is looking to increase the type of services that are offered here, there will be an increase because it's completely coordinated with that. There's this correlation to grants and funding that's being reduced, but the ultimate increase is to asset management and positions. Yes, so if we proceed, you know, we are regularly compared to smaller municipalities in the area that have more services that they offer to their community. Therefore, they have a higher tax rate. So if we wish to proceed in that structure, it would increase.
Thank you. Supplemental?
Thank you. That's it.
Good.
Thank you.
Councillor Tripp, I believe you had another question?
Not a question, just a comment and tying this to the strat plan. So when we come into January and the budget is presented, is it possible to link it to the key elements of the strat plan to show where the money is being spent against the plan? Or is that something we want to look at midway through or next year's budget because the strat plan is so new? It's
I think at some point we can link some like the community development position and recreation programming, offering more recreational programming. We can link that to the strategic plan because the strategic plan was just passed. It will be better built into next year's budget. But by all means, when we did. We knew what we were working with when we were preparing the budget, so we have put a lot of thought into it regarding the strategic plan for budgeting purposes.
perfect. Thank you, and I recognize that it's all of the pieces of the puzzle are coming together at almost the same week. The strat plan would be just a helpful comms tool for us because it really even when you're working through the budget, I can see the similarity in the line to the key objectives of the strat plan. But it helps tell the story as to, with very limited resources, how are we spending them on things that the community is saying is a priority? And likewise, if we're spending money and it's not something identified as a priority, we have to stand accountable to that. So it's a very strong communication piece. But again, this is miles ahead of where we were last year as a brand new council coming to the budget discussions. We're more informed. I think there's more detailed information, and we have the strat plan to marry it. So I think next year will be even stronger with this. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Thompson? Just bring your mic down a bit so they can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to comment related to that, for people who are listening or watching, the increased fire department or full-time fire chief definitely falls under health and safety that was in this strategic plan, as well as economic development, recreation, and culture, which is a huge. So, one person dedicated to doing that kind of thing won't be, people think, oh, adding staff, it's extra money. The return on investment we expect to be very good. Anyhow, just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you. Any other questions from council on this budget? No, and I'd like to thank you for this. It's extremely well presented, extremely professional, and I greatly value that. And the clarity in which you structured our booklet, being able to see where changes have made with the line items on a separate page and allowing us to address it. And also the fact that you have it set out why the changes were made, whether that be an increase or decrease. I just thank you for the ease of reading through this, and it's very well done, so thank you. Do we have any questions on the library budget?
Someone presenting, or are we just going to discuss what's on the paper?
If you have any questions from your readings of the budget or anything?
Ruth, did you want to speak to your handout? Just summarize what you've brought forward.
Sure. I think we had a question about our year-over-year library usage, so I included that again this year with our 2023 library statistics, so you can sort of see how we're being used. I won't go over it in detail, but it's there for your reference. And then again, the staffing, I wasn't sure if that was a question of interest. Well, obviously, if you asked the question, it would be of interest. But I think looking at the year-over-year staffing might be helpful in seeing well, you can see how the staffing's changed. In 2023, we had a big jump in staffing costs. And again, we had a small increase in 2024, but that's largely due to federally prescribed increases. I think that your big question this year regarding the budget was in relation to fundraising, and our commit to fundraising this year is less than previous. In 2023, we did a lot of fundraising in order to sort of help compensate for the added expense of program delivery and staffing costs, because we knew there would be a big jump. That took a lot of time and effort on my part, but on the part of our volunteers as well. And so we've reduced our commit this year to the township, but we have intent to continue to fundraise. We're going to do it differently. I think we'd like to dedicate funds raised to specific projects and services in the library rather than doing blanket fundraising. But I've outlined our approach, I think, on the attached page. Yeah, I hope that answers your question a little bit. We're nervous, given that we worked so hard this last year to make our commit to the town, about committing again to that number and not failing or not being able to succeed in delivering. So that's all I have to say about that.
Any questions, comments? No? I have one question for you. I know the library has their budget and everything, and I know that so much is done with volunteer support. And without those volunteers, we wouldn't be able to manage the way we're managing. Do you know how many approximately volunteers that support the library? I know it's not budget related, but in a way it is, because they're doing a lot of work that is not unpaid.
Yes.
Just roughly.
We did do a calculation this year in preparation for our library survey in 2024, but I can't remember the exact number. We have 8 board members who commit to meetings. I think they have to do 7 a year, and then we have 2 ladies who come in and deliver a reading program to the kids Wednesday mornings, Thursday mornings preschool, and that's another 2 volunteers. But when you factor in, I think we counted in the thousands of hours that they've dedicated. It's a lot of time invested in program delivery and outreach and all of those things too.
And I know it is budget, it is not budget related, but those hours and the fact that you're able to recruit all those volunteers to greatly assist your budget as well. So we thank you for that, and we thank all the volunteers for the time and effort they put into this. And it's not just a library, it is also a learning center for children and adults. of all ages. So I just want to make sure that we appreciate how much money is actually being saved by our volunteers doing all those hours. So thank you. Any other questions, comments? Oh, Councillor Levesque.
Ruth, I just want to thank you for pulling that together, and I think that's really helpful going forward, so we can see year-over-year growth or whatever, and then we can determine where things stand. I think it's really helpful to have that, so thank you for doing that. Just a question around the $2,000 commitment. Was that included in the original 18,000 in revenue? Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, anything further on that? No, thank you, Ruth, for attending today. And I think we now move on to bylaw 5.1, bylaw approval, resolution 311-23. Any resolution, please?
Be it resolved that the following bylaw 74-2023 confirmatory be deemed read a first, second, and final time and passed by council at the special council meeting held December 20th, 2023.
Thank you. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Popke and Councillor Tripp to second. All in favor? That is unanimous, so carried. Move on to 6.1, motion to adjourn. Resolution 312-23. Could you read the resolution, please?
That the special council meeting of December 20th, 2023 be adjourned at 3:32 p.m.
Do we have a mover? Councillor Thompson. A seconder, Councillor Popke. All in favor of adjournment? That is unanimous, so carried. Thank you very much.